Okay, so we've taken a little bit of break and we're back, and we left off talking about the process of, applying for jobs in your last year or so of university.
Mhm.
So Shoko, I know Shoko right now, she hasn't, she's just getting started in the whole rat race of life, so to speak. So she hasn't had too much experience in it, but I've personally experienced shukatsu, or that job application period with Japan. So for just small background, so before I was, a translation lead, I was an IT consultant. So I went through the American, job system. I was a consultant for about 4 to 5 years. And then I came to Japan. And then I went to Japanese language school. So for about 2 years. Once I got my Japanese up to speed, then I started to have to do the shukatsu. And let me tell you, they are strict. They don't really care what experience you've had before. It's just like Shoko said, because in America, it's maybe one page. And it's just this is my school, but it's that was 4 years ago, so you don't really care. And then here's my projects, and this is what I did. In Japan, they're oh, what middle school did you go to? I'm why do you what? I'm what do you mean? I haven't been in middle school in 20 years. What are you talking? But that's that gakureki, that school record. They want to see everything. And so it's definitely, as an American, that's one thing that was kind of stressful for me, where it's okay, now it's I'm applying for university all over again. I have to go get my transcripts from everywhere. I have to figure out the exact years, right? I went from I started and I ended. So, and then this all has to be in Japanese. So that added an extra layer of complexity, right? What else? So for resumes, right? That's okay. So it's not just, so you have, so Shoko knows why I'm laughing, but so there's multiple resumes that you need to send. So there's one where it's I think the rekisho, which is just it includes a summary of your work and education history. And that includes, just a basic timeline. And then I think there's shokumu K, how do you say it?
Oh no, shokumu, what is it?
I forget. Yeah, maybe, Keirekisho, but there's a longer name for it though.
Maybe
we're just there's, but this one is more for about your specific work history, and this is where you go into detail about your work experience.
So this is your CV, your accolades, your all the pieces.
Yes, exactly. So you need both of those. On the one that includes the timeline, basic timeline, you also have to include a photo of yourself. Yes. So it's necessary. So in America, it's usually they try their best to do blind employment, of course, before the interview, right? To avoid discrimination. But I guess in Japan, right, because it's homogenous, mostly homogenous, right? I don't think that discrimination factor might not play in so much in terms of race, right? But I know that depending on ethnicities, for example, there's a group called Burakumin, and have you heard of that, Shoko?
Yes.
Okay, so for Elizabeth, so Burakumin, those are the people who have historically been have kind of dirty jobs. So these are the people who are the butchers. These are the people who who do things that society kind of okay, it has to be done, but it's unclean. Yeah. And so there's actually discrimination for them if they know that, you're burakumin, okay, we're not going to accept you. And then a lot of those people get denied, employment, and then they're forced to go into kind of work for the underground, for the Yakuza. And so a lot of the Yakuza are made up of burakumin members because they've been blacklisted by society. And it kind of just becomes like, a vicious cycle.
Like the caste system in India.
Yes.
Where you have like your lowest caste and you kind of can never get out of it because you're born into that caste, therefore you're that caste, and therefore you can't do these other jobs, but doing these dirty jobs. I think like some of them literally use like manure and stuff to tan leather.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Woo, that's fun.
Yeah. So it definitely still exists. I mean, there's all the like indigenous people, like the Ainu. There's also I don't know if you know this, but like, I mean, there's Tokyo, I mean, there's Japanese people and there's like Okinawan people. So they consider themselves, separate. What else? So that's just the prep work, right? That's just your prep work, right? Okay, so now you have your 2 forms of resumes. You have your picture, and then now you start sending it into companies. And sometimes these interview processes will take, like, sometimes you might go through 3 or 4 different interviews. And I think in America, it might be 1 or 2 if you're not an engineer. I don't know. I've heard
4 to 6 hours,
4 to 6 hours.
Yeah, screening call, HR call, different technical areas. If you pass into the next round, then you might have an interview with like the director of engineering who might give follow-up questions for personality fit. And then sometimes even like after that, you have a 2-week trial period in the office working with people. And then they decide if they want to hire you. That's a lot of commitment, yeah.
Like I heard that the shukatsu period for Japan is like super long. Some of the companies have like 10 interviews and finally you're accepted. Or like even if you go to the 9th interview, you don't get accepted at the final interview. So I've never experienced it yet, but I can't believe
time
that's
consuming
waiting for me.
So, by the sound of it, then people, even if they hate their careers, probably don't end up leaving their careers then, because like I feel like you only have the time to do this when you're a student. Like if you need income to live, you can't take months to look for a job, because that's not working for months and only like full-time interviews seems like, unless you have a lot of savings, it seems kind of impossible. So to me, that sounds like it discourages people from leaving or changing a career. It feels like because it's so hard, you kind of like, you tough it out even if you don't like the path or the career you chose.
So like in Japan, it's really ideal to stick in that same company from the start to until you retire, like lifelong employment. So so people don't tend to like change their jobs that quite often, like compared to Western companies. So that's also really characteristic in Japan. But it is of course changing. If you go to a Western company, it's really normal. It's very common for people to change job like for like 3 or 4 years the next.
Yeah, I agree. So it seems like it starts even earlier, because Shoko, you're saying that when you are in high school, you kind of have to decide your career track, right? So before you even get a chance to really try it out, you're like, okay, this is it. And then even if you don't like it, it's pretty hard to change. And it seems like that continues on even after you graduate.
Yes. Well, it is becoming more flexible, I guess, compared to the past. Some of my friends do change their faculty or their major. It's still a minority of them to change, but it is becoming flexible, I guess.
Yeah. I know there's a lot more So lifelong employment is still kind of the norm, or at least the standard mentality, right? But of course, because of like economic, differences or changes, that's, that's only feasible to a certain extent. Even if you are part of the company for a long time, once you hit a certain age, that's when kind of ageism kind of kicks in. And they're like, hey, we need more young blood, right? But they can't fire you. They legally cannot fire you. And so what they do instead is that they start taking away your task. And then they keep taking away your task until you're left with very mundane things. And they might leave you in the office. Like they're like, hey, this is your new space. Because they can't say, oh, you're fired, right? So they just have to make it so that you quit.
Oh.
Yes.
This feels like Office Space.
It's real.
Maybe, he technically, he doesn't work here anymore, but payrolls at such and such. So, we're just gonna keep moving him until he's working out of the storage closet. I'm like, what?
That's a perfect example. Yep.
Oh, it's so sad. I'm a little bit depressed about this now. So you work for a company until you retire / die, but your last years there may be pretty miserable.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have like senior management or any of those upper level like titles. Yeah.
Well.
But yeah, like Shoko said, things are changing. Like one big change is that there's a lot more recruitment companies and a lot more openness about changing careers, right? So it's a lot easier to change careers as long as you're in the same profession, right? That's a whole nother topic. If you try to change careers and go to a different specialty, that's a very difficult thing to do. Yes, because they are looking at your resume, because your resume has everything, right? And so once they see that, oh, why would you go from sales to marketing, right? Can we give you another sales job?
Because I am bad at it and I want to go to a thing I'm good at. I guess
yes, but
that's not
at 40, that's a tough sell, right?
Thinking about in Thailand, and this is also difficult for me from a different perspective, because I've never applied to a job in Thailand, so it's I don't really know what the grind looks like there. But one of the things I do know that in Thailand is very much a connection society. So if you know the right people, and people say, oh, connections matter everywhere, I'm like, no, but it's different. And China has this too, so both of them are very similar in the who you know. Some snotty 20-year-old who dropped out of college, but dad is so and so, can still get a job at a major company based on a recommendation. Now, this doesn't necessarily guarantee they won't get fired, but being able to skip that line when other people are applying to that position is still a major advantage. And sometimes it'll be like, well, it's my wife's friend's cousin, so give him a job, and it might be a menial job, like it's just make him file papers. But the fact that you can do that in a major company, and then you have work experience at a major company, is still something. And sometimes those people also will be given a lot more chances. So even if they continuously mess up, including sometimes even costing the company money, but if your family is important enough that they don't want to offend your family, they might continue to employ a person. So I'm like, oh, but it's literally costing the company money. Why do you keep employing them? It's it feels like that should be a fireable offense, but it's you don't want to upset so-and-so's dad. It's very important that we maintain this connection with them. So it's kind of interesting in that a lot of things matter until they don't, right? If you are nobody, then yes, your university, your education, your work experience, all of that, everything matters. If you are somebody, none of it matters.
Yes. So one thing I want to mention is the startup kind of the culture. So in Japan, because of lifelong, employment, the whole start your own business, has not really been a thing until recently. And it still kind of has like a lot of like stigma behind it because, Japanese consumers like companies with long histories, right? Everyone likes a nice pedigree, right? It's just like long history, established, big companies. But so even if you want to try to, become an entrepreneur, right? There's a lot of hurdles in place where it's like, because you don't have that long history, right? A lot of people won't buy from you. Even when it comes to government assistance, it's not very much available. I mean, now there is changing. There is a lot more. But there's a lot of, I think it's taxes that really kill people, or not, I guess kill businesses, right? Maybe that's a better word for it. But you have to pay really high taxes in order to get, like, how can I say it? Like kabuki geisha, like that kind of status, like a stock preferred status. And then even if you, yes, and then kabushiki, yes. And then even for the like what is it? Goldo kaisha? Even that like level of, I'm sorry, I'm saying in Japanese terms because I don't know the terms in English. but it's almost like a Japanese LLC. So I think that might be the best equivalent. But in America, it is so easy to become an LLC. You can just go to your state website, apply for it online, pay a fee, and boom, you're legal.
Right. Do those statuses in Japan also offer sort of some degree of like personal protection, as in like your business assets are separate from your personal, so that if something happens? Okay, so they just make that hurdle a lot harder. So yes, you can have the tax, I guess, protection. Like if your business does poorly, you're not going to lose your house, but it's very hard to even get that status, is what you're saying.
Yes, that is correct. And then there's the concept of suing people is not really a thing in Japan.
Right.
So even if you are like a sole proprietor, like you're not really going to get sued.
Well, I mean, I don't just think sued, but I'm saying like, if you have business debts and you're a sole proprietor, those are your debts. Right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, versus if you're an LLC or the Japanese equivalent of it, that's the business's debts. You're not going to lose. The bank isn't going to take your house because of your business debts. The bank will take your business assets and you might have to file bankruptcy or something like that. So, I mean, those protections are the same in Japan, or more or less kind of.
Yeah. That's what makes it so kind of interesting, I think, Japan, because you can like, as a sole proprietor, that's actually the norm, right? And most of the time, most people will just have it in their same account. And the reason why is that it's cheaper tax-wise to do it that way, right? And so, of course, you're liable for certain things. But like I said, a lot of people will not sue you. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm out of luck, right? So that's why that whole, LLC thing didn't really pick up as much. Now, in the past, there was Yugen Gaisha, which is like a limited liability company. But what happened was that was very easy to get. And so a lot of scams started to pop up from that, right? And so people would be like, hey, I have this status, you can trust me. And then you get scammed. And so now they got rid of that system. And so that's why it kept getting harder and harder for people to get that official status, because the number of scams kept increasing.
Got you. And when you say that there's kind of a stigma against being an entrepreneur, is it sort of like your more traditional, like, you can't get a real job, so you're just kind of messing around type of idea? Or
yeah, it's people kind of look down on freelancing, right? People, it's just like, hey, we want security and we want history, right? And you have neither of those, so it's just kind of frowned upon. in general. I was like, oh, why can't you get a full-time job? That's not very, stable, income. How can you take care of a family? And so it's not just like from society, but it's also like your friends and your family as well.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of personal. Well, I mean, part of it I think is understanding, right? Because the US is built on this like exceptionalism. Like if you personally, individually can excel and be the exception, then that's a good thing. Whereas like, I feel like a lot of more traditional Asian societies, and which is actually a lot of more traditional societies in general, if you're the exception, then you're the weirdo. Like you're the person who doesn't know how to behave properly in society. So you need to like learn to blend in better, and you need to learn to meet expectation. And your role is less individual. Like your social duty is more important than your individual duty, kind of thing like that. So your social duty is to be a productive member of society, and that means this, including like the age you're supposed to get married and have kids, whatever else. And so like Shogo, Mac and I had talked about this before, where I was consulting for a while in engineering, which is pretty normal actually, but because my mother didn't understand technology, she just looked at it like, you play on computers all day. And she was telling me, and I was like, well, I'm working and I have my own business. And she says, that's not a real business. I'm like, what do you mean it's not a real business? She said, you don't have an office. If you're a real business, you would have an office. I'm like, but I don't need an office. That's extra money I'm going to spend. And she's like, but you're not a legitimate business if you don't have an address. And it was just back and forth. And then eventually when I started working at a company, her perspective was like, you finally have a job. And I'm like, I've been working for 10 years. And it was just funny because like, I feel like you almost need to be an extra innovator, like, come up with a thing that no one has ever seen before your entrepreneurship is very valued. So like, let's say, you invented the original video game console, then your entrepreneurship is innovative and exceptional and, has a huge amount of value because you are, a paradigm changer in the industry. So it's like, oh, I have I'm an entrepreneur. What do you do? I think it's a little bit more accepted in the US to be like, oh no, I own, 50 convenience stores. But the fact that I own 50 convenience stores is a lot of money, and I have a steady stream of income that's coming in.
Yes.
Whereas it's like, oh, they're a convenience store owner. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money. It's like, what do you do? Oh, they're just a convenience store owner. It's such a different mentality.
Yeah, it's definitely, the title is important, and also the scalability of like your influence, I guess, right? Just like Elizabeth said, if I just said, oh, I make video games, they would just be like, oh, that's not a real job. But if I said, I made the first video game, or like over 1 million people follow me on this account, people were like, yeah, wow, that's amazing, right?
I wonder, so this is where I'm curious, because I mean, like, the internet, I think, has made, people can learn about what others do in all parts of the world. But like, based on that idea, do Japanese people find the concept of someone's full-time job being like a YouTube vlogger? Like, do Japanese people find that weird? Like, your job is to write video logs on YouTube, and to and make money off.
Like a YouTuber is like a really pop job these days. Like YouTuber, Instagrammer, influencer, those are kind of big these days. They kind of are being on the same level as like being like a celebrity or a pop star.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
it breaks the normal flow of you don't have a real job. Okay, because it's popular and it's trendy.
And also, yes, they get a lot of money through promotion and just living and making videos, especially in like Japan. like JK girls, high school girls like trendy things. They like those influencers or YouTubers who show off their trend or like how their life. So yes, YouTuber, and those are like a different level of employment in Japan.
Okay. So I mean, I guess that's a acceptable type of entrepreneur.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Japan is much more technologically advanced, like overall. So I mean, I know even in middle school I had some classmates that had like the latest cell phone because they just came from Japan, and they're like, you don't have a cell phone? And I was like, no, I'm 12. This was before smartphones and everything, like, so I'm like, no, like they're expensive and I'm 12, like why would I have a cell phone? But they're like like a cell phone here with a charm and then a pager here and like, you know, everything.
What's a pager?
What is a pager? Wow. Okay. Nope. We'll save that for another episode.
But you know, so I mean, I can see that being a little bit like more accepted in its celebrity status. But in Thailand, like in Bangkok, sure, but like in, you know, outside of Bangkok, people know like certain Thai celebrity influencers, but I think like most people, like definitely like the older generation would be like, what's your job? Wait, no, I don't understand. You make videos?
No.
Oh, you make videos on a channel, so you're a newscaster? No? like just a concept, like, because there a lot of people outside of the cities, they're not on the internet like all the time, and some of them, like, they have the most basic smartphone. It's like a Huawei smartphone or something like that, and their primary use is to, like, I don't know, send messages on WhatsApp. So it's not like, it's just the level of technological connectivity. So the idea that YouTube is for anything other than like short funny videos, and that you might actually be making a living off of YouTube, is still like to most of like the older generation in Thailand. Yeah.
Well, also in Japan, maybe if you ask the older generation, the same reaction will come.
Okay, yeah. I'm just like, I don't know if there's parents who's ever like, oh, let me show off my daughter. My daughter's a YouTube star. I don't know if that's a thing or not.
I don't think so.
Versus like, you know, show off my daughter, like, you know, my daughter's a doctor. You know?
I guess for Japan, what's considered like typical like occupations that people strive for or aim for?
Well, of course, doctors are popular. So, but like these days, YouTubers are really getting higher and higher. And what else? Doctor, and also like businessman. This person. What else? I don't know.
Those are the only three lanes.
Engineer.
Corporate employee, YouTuber, doctor. That's it.
Of course, there's like a lot more. Maybe engineer.
I think like I very, very much enjoy being a software engineer here in the US, but like based on what I've been told, and I don't know if this is still the case, because like a lot of my information about Japanese society is from like the 90s. So, but like, you know, the thing I was told by friends is that, you know, even though there's so much innovation, like technological innovation in Japan, it's not as much fun to work in software, to work in engineering there, because you don't get credit for anything you create and your company owns everything. So that's what I was told, where like there is interesting technology coming out there, but it's not like you yourself get to pick the projects you work on or get to take credit for the projects you work on. It's like, somebody at the top of the company makes a decision about what you work on, and you just have to do it. So even though you might be a very smart engineer, it becomes like a factory line type of thing. Like, you're responsible for this and this, responsible for this and this and this and this. And so, none of the fun parts of being an engineer come together. So I was like, oh, okay. But I don't know if that's still the case in engineering firms in Japan, but like that mentality, some of my friends have told me like Japanese culture is still very much like that. Like, it's not your achievement, it's your company's achievement. And it's not your it's not your idea, it's the company's idea. So everything kind of belongs to whatever organization you belong to.
Well, I think it really does. I think it still is, maybe because going back to like the lifelong employment, if you were accepted to that company, it's your job to try to dedicate yourself in that company and try to get, like, if you do something that benefits the company, of course even though you did it, it's the whole company's success. So also it's a way, so like the company is your community and you belong to that and you try to do the best of it. So yeah.
Well, I don't have any more questions or comments about anything.
Me too.
Okay, yeah. So I guess, yeah, we can wrap up. But yeah, definitely work like kind of the industry in like Japan. That could be a whole another like segment. Because I know a lot of people, especially foreigners who want to work in Japan, are very curious about, how do I break in, right? And a lot of the time unfortunately it's like English teaching, right? You got to get in through English teaching. But a lot of people, their skill set, they're not English teachers, right? So if you teach English or you are a software engineer, right? Then your skills are easily transferable or marketable in Japan. While if you are, let's say, a nurse or a doctor, right, your ability to transfer your skills might be a bit more difficult, especially depending on where you're from. So if you're coming from America, there's, Japan has accreditation programs that, if you do like 6 months or a year of training, you can practice in Japan. But I heard that they tried to bring a lot of nurses from the Philippines, but they didn't get the same kind of treatment as like the American citizens did. And their accreditation program wasn't as, good. And so it was hard for them to get certified in Japan. And they ended up having to do like very hard, labor intensive work instead of what they usually do. And then they just left. So right now, there's a bit of a brain drain going on in the, the Japanese society right now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to go through. I mean, honestly, I feel that way about people going from anywhere else to the US. And it's kind of funny because there are times when like the US is like, do you meet our standards? I'm like, technically that country actually has higher standards in these things. So like, people like, some of this has to do with social stigma. So like I think a lot of people think like Mexicans are uneducated. They might not explicitly think that, but there's kind of a assumption that Mexican universities aren't as good and Mexican like medical system or whatever else isn't as good. So there are people who come from Mexico as doctors, nurses, and pharmacists who come to the US and they're like, we don't know if you live them. But in Mexico and actually in a lot of other countries, pharmacists aren't just the people who provide you the meds. They are required, they write the prescription. So the doctor tells the pharmacist what the patient's going through and what the diagnosis is. And the pharmacist is actually the person who reviews their medical history, looks at all of their other medications to see if there might be any drug interaction, and actually writes a prescription. And in order to be a pharmacist, you actually So they're better. But, you know, I think that there's a little bit of a stigma based on like which country and region you come from and the assumptions about the quality of education.
Yep, I agree. I feel like, I guess I never really thought about that, or at least it never came to my mind, because I did hear a lot of stories of people coming to America and then having to, you know, they'll have a doctorate or whatever, you know, specialty, and then they just, you know, they can't do it or because of the accreditation program, and so a lot of, you know, knowledge is lost because of that lack of support.
So much for elaborating and entertaining all of our questions.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a fun time. Thank you for letting me join.
No problem.
So I'm Elizabeth from Ouen Designs once again, and you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, pretty much all things, and we'll have links below.
And I am Mac from Borderless Translations, and make sure to check us out on our links below, and don't forget to subscribe.
Yes. Thank you for joining Borderless Conversations. Sawasdee ka.
Johnny.
Bye.